My Gavan and Melonin, and well met indeed. I am Aragorn Galadurthan, and welcome back to the last content on the channel. I'm joined again by Hyganel, Jessica. This is my wife, in case I've never mentioned that before. And again, Taran Kalame is sitting outside saying farewell with us as well. But before we go, we've got about 30 to 40 minutes to talk about the Return of the King. And we're going to do what we've done before. So we've watched The Return of the King. Jess made note of any questions she had, and so did her sister and her sister's boyfriend. And then we are going to answer them here. And again, it's just a bit of fun, so don't take it too seriously. But I hope you'll enjoy this last video on the channel. I can't stress that enough, but this is going to be the last video on the channel. And then I'm gone forever, which I'm looking forward to greatly. But I will do a farewell video after this, but that's not going to have any content. That's just me saying why I'm leaving and that I'm leaving. So this is the last one of content. So I do hope that you'll enjoy.
Well, what an introduction.
I'm just saying it in stone, making sure everyone knows that I'm going and this is it.
Okay. So my first question about the Return of the King film is, why is Smeagol so affected by the ring? Frodo seems moody at best when he's carrying the ring.
Bad question to begin with, I'm afraid, because we just don't know. Smeagol is so affected by the ring because he has to be for the story to work. There's nothing written about Smeagol that suggests he's got an addictive personality or he's particularly susceptible to ring corruption. He just is. And that's it, I'm afraid. Sorry.
This one I think you're going to say, again, is a rubbish question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Where does Grima come from on top of the tower in Isengard?
That is a ridiculous question. He comes through whatever hatch is in the floor that lets them climb up to Isengard. But that's all for the film. There is a hatch in the roof in the tower. And I mean that literally. Tolkien describes a hatch in the roof that lets you out onto the roof. And the film, for whatever reason, opted to not display a hatch. So we're all forever guessing, how on earth do they get to the top of that tower?
Yeah. My next one is, you said a fun fact about the Saruman scene, the Saruman death scene, and I would like you to say that fact again. It was about Sir Christopher Lee.
Yeah, so if you watch the normal version of Return of the King, you don't get to see Saruman die. And Christopher Lee was very, very, very disappointed that he was cut out of the Return of the King. But anyone that's watched the film knows that. It's not that much of a fun fact.
No, it's not that one. You said it's about him
being stabbed. Yeah, something then. So that point is just Christopher Lee was very angry that he wasn't really present in the Return of the King in the cinematic release because he wasn't told that his parts were going to be cut. But the interesting tidbit is from Christopher Lee himself, where in the film he gets stabbed on top of Orthanc in the extended edition. He gets stabbed in the back by Grima. And he doesn't really make any noise. And the quote or the possible folklore is that Christopher Lee, Peter Jackson instructed him to sort of let out a scream or a yell or something like that to denote he'd been stabbed in the back. And Christopher Lee asked Peter Jackson, have you ever actually been stabbed or stabbed someone? And Peter Jackson said no. And Christopher Lee said, well, I have. And actually, when you're stabbed, you don't make any noise at all. Your body goes into a sort of shock and you just gasp for air. And so that's what he does in the film. And then I don't know, I think, is whether or not Christopher Lee himself has stabbed a person, which he may well have done. He was in the early runner of the SAS. Or if he's just seen someone stabbed, which is probably more likely. Because of his past. So there's a little fun fact for you. That's why Saruman doesn't really make a noise when he's stabbed in the back, because that's apparently what happens when you get stabbed.
And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. Why is Pippin so desperate to look in the Palantir?
Because once he's looked into it, he's got then a longing for it. And of course, Saruman's on the other side, or Sauron, sorry, is on the other side. But it's just that he has a real longing for it. It's, again, just a story point, really.
What does the Palantir do to Pippin? Why was he in a trance of sorts?
So when he actually looks in the Palantir, he's talking to Sauron, as he says in the film.
Right.
And Sauron is probing his mind, trying to find out who he is. And from that, he learns that a hobbit has the ring. But he mistakenly thinks that it's Pippin that has it.
And when they get the Palantir off of him, and then Gandalf has to do some magic on him, is that because Sauron has cloaked him and done something to him, or is that just because Pippin wasn't ready for the amount of magic that would go through him?
Pippin absolutely wasn't ready. So it takes great willpower to look into a Palantir for a start, but also to then wrestle with Sauron on the other end. And so it's just massively draining, and Pippin is not prepared for that.
Does Arwen have her father's foresight? Because she sees a vision in her future, doesn't she? And then she gets annoyed at Elrond for not telling her.
Oh, yeah, about the kid. No, she doesn't really have his foresight.
So is that just a one-off, or...?
That's just for the film.
Oh, it doesn't even happen in the book?
No, she doesn't leave Middle-earth in the book. She's always going to stay with Aragorn.
Right, yeah, because Aragorn was always going to be king.
Mm-hmm.
Do elves age slowly as children and then speed up and then slow down again? Or do they age normally and then they slow down in adulthood?
So they age like as quickly as well, they grow as quickly as humans in the early doors, just as a survival trait. So they're not babies for hundreds of years. They grow to about their sort of teenage years very quickly, and then they stay as teenagers for ages and ages. And then they cap out looking at about their early 20s for the rest of their lives if they don't go through hardship.
If only. Looking at your peak. It's like when you choose to be a vampire, isn't it? You've got to choose your age carefully because you're like that forever. Have all the elves left on the last ship? How many stay behind with Elrond?
We don't know.
But are there like a handful? We don't know. Don't really want to
Some elves stay
speculate.
behind. A lot of the elves have already left. And it's said to be the last ship, but then it isn't. We know that for a fact because Legolas then starts a colony in Ithilien, and some elves help him do that. So there are still elves in Middle-earth even after the last ship has left. But we don't know. We don't know how many. And those that stay behind do just fade away eventually. And again, I don't know what that means. Do they die? Does it just mean they die and they're buried and that's it? Do they just turn into humans? It's just no.
Or they disintegrate.
Disintegrate, quite literally fade away.
Quite literally fade.
We don't know.
Oh, what does the green light into the sky do from, I think it's Minas Morgul, isn't it?
It just tells Barad-dûr that he's ready.
Oh, it's just like a beacon. Right.
Yeah.
Is Frodo called by the Ringwraiths because he was stabbed or because they call to the ring?
So they call to a little bit of both. So because he's a ring bearer, and because he's been in the Shadow World, and because he's also been affected by the blade, he's then just a little more susceptible to the Ringwraiths, who are fully in the Shadow World. So it's a little bit of both, but it's mostly because of the growing ring corruption makes it easier for them to
zone in on him.
Yeah, like home in on him.
Why does Denethor dislike Faramir so much? And then I have another follow-up question to that.
So part of it is just parental preference. He just prefers Boromir. Boromir's stronger, more courageous. Boromir does great deeds.
The first child.
There's just a little bit of that. But also, Denethor deeply distrusts Gandalf, and Faramir is tutored by Gandalf when he's younger. And Faramir shows an interest in non-warfare, essentially. And so it just creates this whole image of that son I don't really like. He's a weakling. He's not as courageous. He wants to sit at home and research rather than go and fight. And also he dislikes the hold that Gandalf has over him.
So why did he allow him to be tutored by Gandalf?
Well, because Gandalf is a Maiar. Why would you not let your son be tutored by him?
True.
So it's like he hates Gandalf, but he also appreciates the incredible importance of getting your son tutored by a wizard.
And Boromir wasn't.
Boromir wasn't.
And that's why he says, you're loyal to a wizard.
No, he says not some wizard's pupil.
Not some wizard's pupil.
Yeah, and that's just a slight nod to the past of Faramir and Gandalf. Which the film doesn't then go on to explain at all, and it's a line that you'd blink and you'd miss. But if you do read the books, yeah, you learn that Gandalf tutored Faramir, and there's more to it.
Does the King of the Dead reveal himself to Aragorn in the mountain?
In the film he does, just to foreshadow himself, but he doesn't in the book.
Does Elrond deliver Aragorn's sword in the book? No, because he carries it around. Yep, okay, answered that one. We don't know this one either, do we? Who is the King of the Dead?
No, we don't know. So the King of the Dead just led the men of the mountains who swore the oath to Isildur and then didn't fulfill that oath, and so Isildur curses them, and they stay in the mountains forever, and they turn into the dead people.
Is there more character development for Faramir and Eowyn's relationship? Because they get together pretty damn fast.
How have you spelled Eowyn?
We don't need to know that.
No, there isn't very much character development. So Faramir and Eowyn don't meet each other until they both end up in what's called the Houses of Healing, which is Minas Tirith's hospital. Eowyn is healed by Aragorn, and the extended version of the film does have a clip that like references that. But so she's in there because she's just been healed, and Faramir's in there because of course he went on the suicidal charge and had to be saved, and so he's healing in there as well, and that's where they strike up a little relationship, and that's basically all the character development we get on it.
Got a bit burnt too.
But yes, and because he gets a bit burnt, but they do marry and they do live happily ever after.
Yeah, it's a nice story, really. And also that is phonetic, so I didn't say it wrong. Anyway. Can you please expand on the differences between the Eye of Sauron in the book and the film?
So we did talk about this at great length in the first one, but we'll go over it again, I suppose. So the Eye of Sauron in the film is an actual eye that looks around on top of the tower, but the Eye of Sauron in the book is a metaphor for Sauron's all-encompassing presence and the fact that he is watching everything he can at all times, and he has spies everywhere, he has scouts everywhere, he is in all things. But he is not an actual eye on top of a tower.
Who is the mouth of Sauron? Because we don't see him in the normal film.
No, I don't think you do, actually.
No, you don't. Because the first time I saw it, I
haven't seen the non-extended
surprised.
edition. In fact, I think I've only seen the non-extended editions maybe twice, and I've seen all the films hundreds of times. I never watched the non-extended edition. So I don't know what is or isn't in it. But no, I don't think the mouth is, actually. But the mouth of Sauron is a dark Númenorian. And so he's one of the Númenorians that survived the downfall but followed Sauron. And that is all he is. He's a dark Númenorian, twisted to serve Sauron. Well, they already did, so he didn't need to be twisted. And he just acts as Sauron's mouth. Sauron doesn't like to show himself, so he sends the mouth to do his talking for him.
And is his physical appearance the same in the book as it is in the film? So, like, because obviously he has a very large mouth, and I realised no. So he's just literally just like a.
He's just a dark Númenorian. He's said to have something is supposed to be uneasy about his features. No, I think I've even made that up. No, because Peter Jackson. The mouth of Sauron in the film, they enlarged his mouth because A, he's called the mouth of Sauron, so it drew attention to it, and B, they wanted him to look off. They wanted something to look funny about him, like funny in a sort of odd way.
Maybe uneasy.
Uneasy way. So they deliberately enhanced the size of his mouth. There's also an interesting shot, if you ever watch the behind the scenes. They first toyed with the idea of his mouth being up rather than horizontal. So it was vertical rather than horizontal. And it just looks really silly because it's still... one side still moves more than the other. Like everyone's bottom side of your mouth moves more than the top. And so when your mouth is vertical, it was just really funny. Like one side of his face was moving more than the other, and it looks silly. But no, the actual mouth of Sauron is just a dark Númenorian who talks on Sauron's behalf. But we don't really know anything about him. He's another underdeveloped character.
Is the Shire just plodding along merrily through the War of the Ring, or is there anything going on there?
So it's plodding along merrily right up to the point that Saruman invades it. But he doesn't do that with orcs. So after Saruman's defeated, again, in a change from the film, this is possibly one of the biggest things in the book that the film cuts out, which is called the Scouring of the Shire. So Saruman is defeated in Isengard, and he's trapped inside Isengard. Grima had thrown the Palantir out of the tower, so they don't have access to that anymore. And so Grima and Saruman are trapped inside the tower, and the Ents are watching over them. Saruman uses his powers of persuasion to convince the Ents to let him go, and he does that using his magic. And so Saruman and Grima then are let go. But then, interestingly, Gandalf and the company walk past Saruman and Grima out in the countryside, and again, they stupidly let them live. So Saruman heads north. He rallies his then evil men from Bree. There's a horde of people in Bree who all serve Saruman, and he musters them all together, and they go and they invade the Shire. So when Frodo, Merry, Pippin and Sam all come back from their adventure, they come back to the Shire being controlled by Saruman, and he's turning it into a sort of an industrial hellscape. He hasn't gotten very far, he hasn't controlled it for very long, but he's starting to. He's cutting things down, he's ruining houses, he's turning it horrible. And Pippin and Merry especially muster their relevant peoples, because Pippin is from a very powerful and noble, for hobbits, house. And he musters his people, the Tooks, and Merry musters his people, the Brandybucks, and they come back, and the four of them lead the charge, and then they defeat Saruman's men, send them packing, and then Grima stabs Saruman in the back, and then Grima's killed by arrows, And that ends the actual story. So Frodo, Merry, Pippin and Sam become sort of heroes of the Shire because they quite literally save it. And the reason, so they become heroes because they save the Shire, but then to turn it back to your ultimate question, the Shire has no knowledge of anything happening outside its borders. So some people walk through the Shire from Bree to the Blue Mountains, mostly dwarves, and they drop off some messages. So the Shire has a kind of vague idea that dark things are happening, but they're not interested in it. They bury their heads and they ignore it. Much in the same way, if you were watching the news and it said that, I don't know, Mongolia, there's an uprising in Mongolia and someone's killing hundreds of people, you'd most likely be like, oh, that's terrible, and then carry on with your day. Such is a damning indictment of life. But that's exactly what the Shire is like. There'll be news of all of this disturbing information. Goblins are coming down out of the Misty Mountains at this point, invading both east and west. And obviously Sauron is attacking Gondor, and news of this would get back to the Shire, but they actively ignore it. They don't want to know anything about it.
So there's a premonition, isn't there? One of them gets a premonition. Is it Sam or...
When Frodo looks in the mirror of Galadriel in the first film, the little clip that he sees is a nod to the Scouring of the Shire, where there's orcs and the Shire's on fire and there's industry everywhere and all the trees have been cut down and it's dark and fiery. Yeah, that's the film's little nod to the Scouring. But I can understand why they cut it. The Return of the King already gets blamed for having too many endings. Yeah. So having then a whole extra ending where the hobbits lead an uprising would just be too much.
Why aren't the Eagles involved from the beginning? I'm not saying that... Why didn't they fly?
So what are you saying? What exactly is your
Why didn't
suggestion?
they assist? Like, they could have assisted.
They could have just flown them in, couldn't they?
No, but they could have assisted with like their travel or like given messages.
There's a very interesting, this is all I'm going to say on this point because I'm not going to grace this with an answer, but there's a very interesting interview with Tolkien himself where one of the first people who wrote a letter to him, unfortunately, and I say that with the strongest possible terms, one of the first letters written to him was someone who wrote quite literally, why didn't the Eagles fly them to Mordor? And Tolkien was asked about this in an interview, and his answer was, he literally said, when people ask me that, I say to them, shut up. And that's all he said. Because it's obvious. The Eagles didn't fly them to Mordor because if they did, there wouldn't be a story. It is as easy as that. Why didn't the Eagles help them? Because there wouldn't be a story. It's as easy as that. Why are the Valar, these all-powerful beings, sitting on an island doing sod all? Because if they came over and got involved, it'd be over like that, and there wouldn't be a story. Like, the question is just moronic. The film makes it worse by having the Eagles appear as this like Deus Ex Machina. They're a plot point. They save people when people need to be saved, and that draws more attention to the Eagles being all powerful but lazy bastards, which is not what they are. They're not in the story because if they were, there wouldn't be a story. That is the answer. You can talk about Eagles being servants of Manwë and not getting involved because Manwë says not to. And you can talk about them fearing being killed in Mordor, which is another argument you see all the time. That they can't fly into Mordor because they'll just be shot down. The Fell Beast will kill them. Sauron will use his power, something like that. You can talk about them not wanting to be involved in Middle-earth, again, because commandments from Manwë, or just not liking humans. As many of you pointed out, Gandalf and Gwaihir's relationship is struck up because Gwaihir is wounded by a human's arrow, and Gandalf heals him, and that's where their friendship begins. So thank you all for pointing that out last time. So you can talk about all of those things, but the bottom line and the simple answer is if the Eagles flew them to Mordor, there wouldn't be a story. Next question.
I wasn't expecting you to get quite so passionate.
Well, it just feels like it's a good time to finally tell people, and particularly because I watched the Tolkien interview where he tells them to shut up. I only saw that the other day, and it just made me laugh. I couldn't believe that was his response. I thought it was funny.
What happens to Sauron in the book when the ring is destroyed?
He is blown away on a mighty wind. So the ring's destroyed, and Sauron's then obviously becomes even weaker in power than he already is, and he turns into a great darkness, and a shadow rises up from Barad-dûr, and it starts beaming down on the free peoples, and then a wind. Again, the Valar decide they're going to get involved, and a great and powerful wind blows from the west, and Sauron is blown away on the wind, and we never hear of him again. So he doesn't get banished to the void like Melkor does, which is like the place beyond actual existence. He doesn't get banished to there. He's now so weak and so unpowerful. He can't exist as a thing, as a corporeal entity anymore. So he's just swirling around the remnants of his achievements, to quote Red Dwarf.
Okay. Does Aragorn believe Arwen to be dead since the last battle?
Yeah, so that again is another thing that does actually happen. When Aragorn looks in the Palantir, so in the film, again in the extended edition, we see Gandalf saying Sauron's not going to take this bait, and Aragorn's like, oh no, I think he will. So, and he goes and he looks into the Palantir and he challenges Sauron directly. And Sauron is prideful, so he takes the challenge. But Sauron also tries to beat Aragorn at his own game, and he shows him images of Arwen being dead. So he tries to convince Aragorn that his cause is lost anyway because Arwen's dead, which is a lie. And so then Aragorn does have some doubt after that Arwen might be dead. But she isn't, obviously, and they get married and they live happily ever after.
Yeah. Is Legolas recognised as special or awarded a status for his role in...
No, so after the War of the Ring, Legolas and Gimli remain great friends, and they go to the caves behind the Hornburg, and Gimli sets up a sort of dwarven colony there, or just goes to look at it, I think, actually. I don't think they set up a colony. But anyway, the glittering caves behind the Hornburg are meant to be really beautiful, and dwarves particularly would love them, so they go there, and then Legolas founds a little elven colony in Ithilien to help Ithilien regrow, which is the forested land to the east of the Anduin River. It's between the Anduin and Mordor. That's called Ithilien. And Legolas goes there, and the elves help that to regrow as a forest, and then eventually him and Gimli sail together to Valinor.
I've asked how insular is the Shire from Middle-earth, but I thought we probably kind of touched on that. So
yeah, really, really, really insular. Yeah, they don't take part in world events.
Okay. And then why are Frodo, Sam and Bilbo allowed into Valinor?
Apart from, of course, when 4 hobbits do take part in world events. But hobbits as a whole are not part of this world, which is quite then hypocritical of Merry to say to the Ents, you're a part of this world, aren't you? Because the hobbits don't give a damn. They'll just sit in the Shire till they die, basically. They'll never rise up. But anyway, the hobbits that are allowed into Valinor are all ring bearers, and that's why they're allowed to go. So Bilbo, obviously, Frodo, obviously, and Sam has the ring for a really short time when he thinks Frodo's dead, but he still has the ring, so he qualifies. And Gimli's allowed in because of Legolas's friendship, because friendship wins all.
Friendship is the most important thing ever.
Yep.
Why ring bearers? Why are they allowed in?
I don't know.
Just because they've
endured hardship, maybe, or because they're elevated because of their
evil,
status.
kind of.
Yeah, I assume so.
They're all my questions.
Yay!
So I realised there may be some things that are missing, but they were the things that cropped up that we asked questions of when we were watching. So that was the last one.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for watching.
I was going to get Callie for your outro.
If indeed you have. I will do, as I've already now laboured the point, one final video that just says goodbye and is me explaining, because I keep getting lots of people asking why I'm going. So I need to do a video that says I've gone. I can't just leave it hanging. So I will do one final video that just says goodbye, but there will not be any more normal content on the channel. The Humankind series will just end in the middle because that's how I've become to do them nowadays. And Dol Amroth and Bree won't go any further. So I tried. It's not we, you haven't failed, it's me. I tried to do Dol Amroth and Bree, but I'm just so over it. I'm so done. So I'll do a video saying goodbye. That will probably be just after Christmas because I'm off work for that week between Christmas and New Year, so that I can do it then without eating into my time. I might do it earlier, depends how I feel. But anyway, thank you so much for watching all of these videos. I'll say a more heartfelt thank you in the next one. So for this one, I should just say thank you for watching these missing information videos. I hope you've enjoyed them. We don't plan to do The Hobbit, I'm afraid, because I don't think there'll be any questions and I don't want to do it. So there we are. But for now, thank you very much for watching indeed. If you have any questions, post them down below and we will still try and respond to them, but they won't be mentioned in a video. But until we speak again, dear friends, Navair Naden Pedimad.
Melonine.
I forgot my own outro. I'm so excited to not be doing this anymore. Melonine, that means my friends.
And farewell.
And farewell.